Hello, everyone. I hope you all are doing great and welcome back again. I'm so sorry that I couldn't post video or tutorials for last couple of weeks. The reason is like I just came from my 5 weeks India vacation, but I hope you all are doing great. Welcome back. Welcome to the new people who are just joining in our channel. Also, I would like to request you to please like, share, subscribe this channel for getting notified of more such videos. So, having said that, let's get started. As I'm back in my home in US, so I'm gonna now continue the same journey that I started off, like trying to at least share one or two video every week, if not more, right? And also, please put your comment section. I do see all the comments. Unfortunately, sometimes I'm not able to respond to all of them, but they are really helpful for me to get some feedback and also trying to understand like what kind of topics are really valuable for you. And I definitely like if even if I'm not responding, I try to consider those comments or questions for planning my videos for upcoming sessions. So do keep send them. Don't get disheartened if I'm not responding. I'll definitely try to respond if possible. If not, I definitely look out for the videos. You might get your answers in maybe some upcoming videos, right? So having said that, let's get started. So today I'm going to focus on this video is just the first part of like I'm planning to do a two video back to back, one this week, another next week. There is around the EDI interview preparation. I've actually gone through some of those in my previous videos, but I thought like maybe this couple of videos okay might be like helpful as a refresher to all of you. So let me quickly share my screen and then we can discuss more about it. All right. In today's video, right? So what if you see what I've done is I've actually listed in this Word document uh, close to seven different categories, starting from very basic, typically how any interview is taken, right, based on my experience. They start with very basic fundamentals of your EDI knowledge, then slowly they get into the application itself, and then they go more higher level, more complex, more advanced topics. And this is how real world technical interviews are taken. So I have actually tried to do it that way for our sessions, right? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna maybe just talk about the first four categories like EDI fundamentals, Sterling integrator basics, mapping and translation, and business process development. And maybe next video, I'm gonna then start from like system administration monitoring, scenario based, advanced questions, and best practices and optimization. All right. Now, let's focus on the EDI fundamentals, right? Which is the first category here. So typically, when is interview taken, the first thing that we ask, right, or we try to understand is, do you have at least the basic knowledge of the uh, concept itself? What is EDI, right? So you should be familiar, okay, of expecting this question very like at the very beginning of any interview, and you need to be able to uh, describe what does EDI mean. So start with the full form of EDI, right? Electronic data interchange. Now break it into few sections, right? Like the first word itself, electronic. That means it's not there's no manual intervention in this, right? So try to explain like why electronic, right? So when you try to explain what is EDI, you need to mention about like uh, transferring files, right, from one place to another place, or one sender system to another receiver system electronically or digitally. And then the second word is data. So what you're transferring is basically the data itself. Now, what kind of data, you can go a little bit more in detail. What typical documents that we share between different business entities, right? And interchange in the sense it's not only one way communication, right? Like if you are sending something, you're expecting maybe an acknowledgement back, or maybe a document in response to what you have sent, right? Let's say if you are sending a purchase order, then you might be expecting an invoice after that, or a shipment invoice after that, right? So you need to explain that correlation, and then be able to explain what that EDI is all about. And then the very next question, very relevant or very closely tied to is that might be asked is, why is it important in B2B integration or business to business integration? Why is it important, right? So you should be able to explain that for the integration from application to application, systems to systems, how EDI plays a pivotal role, right? You should be able to explain that concept, and that way, then the interviewer would get a pretty good or solid understanding of like whether you are really have some deeper knowledge on EDA itself, right? Before even he moves into the application level questions. So be prepared with that question at the very beginning of the interview. Now, as a follow up to that same initial, like what is EDA or define EDI or B2B integration, the next question is, can you explain a typical EDI flow between two different trading partners? So in here, they are expecting that you should be able to, at least on a very high level, be able to explain what an EDI flow looks like. So maybe you can take a retail business, right? And then you might just take like an example and then start maybe talking about some specific documents at sequence, right? Okay, like how do we what is the first document that is sent, right? And then in response to that, what document is being expected, you can take maybe next 12 and 80 fact as a standard, right? So typically you should be able to explain, maybe just consider one specific industry, and just like if you're familiar with financial industry, take that industry. If you're experienced in retail CPG, take that in industry, and then take the specific document types and be able to explain that EDI flow between those two trading partners, right? So consider some messages that you can mention while you are responding to this question. The next question is, what are the main EDI standards, right? That always is being asked, is just like gauging what kind of standards are you familiar with, right? Or have you experienced or have worked on it, right? And what is the difference, right? Like, let's say if someone asks, what is the difference between X12 and EDIFACT, when you mention X12 and EDIFACT in your response to the first question, how do they differ, right? So you should be able to explain that ANSI X12 is mostly being used in North America region, right? Whereas EDIFACT is more popular in it's not that it is not in used in North America, but it is more popular in the European region. And then you should be able to like maybe take a specific a document type like purchase order, and be able to explain like maybe some of the high level differences in X12, like the naming convention, what do you call, the envelope related information, right? And they just tell like it's just another standard, okay, but the nomenclature is different, right? Like maybe you can explain like some of the segments that you use in X12 versus some of the segments that you use in EDIFACT. So you should be able to explain those differences in this question, right? The next one is, what is an EDI envelope and what is its structure for X12 EDIFACT, right? So this is where like it's just like if you have already answered that in the previous question, as I mentioned, then you don't have to like they might skip this, right? So but if you haven't, right, if you haven't asked about the envelope differences and all that, they might ask a follow-up questions to that, right? So be prepared for that. And then maybe the next question is like going beyond standards, right? That's the data standards. The very common thing that they expect is you should be having a good knowledge of the communication protocols that is being used, right, for transferring files in and out. So they might ask like, what is the difference between FTP, SFTP, FTPS, AS2s, right, AS3s, all that. So and HTTPS, right? So be prepared to talk about like at least on a high level some of the differences, some of the reasons where we use what, right? Things like that around these protocols. I hope you're all familiar with these protocols if you have worked in the EDI industry. Or so be ready for explaining those things, right? So these are like some of the very high level. I'm not, this is not exhaustive list, right, but this is at least some of the guidance that I can provide where you can expect these questions in respect to the EDI fundamentals. Now the second category that I'm going to touch base is around Sterling integrator basics, right? So now slowly they are pivoting to your application level knowledge, right? How much you're familiar with Sterling integrator. Maybe if there's another product that you're working, like maybe Axway, they might go to that basics. But I'm talking about Sterling integrator here, right? So they might ask, okay, what is Sterling integrator, right? You should be able to explain, right? What is Sterling integrator itself, right? And what are its core components, right? Now when I talk about core components, you should be able to explain the business process engine, the mapping functionality, the communication protocol setup related components, right? The troubleshooting related information, things like that. So just visualize in your mind when you're answering this as a mental model is just visualize the dashboard of Sterling integrator and just focus on the left hand side, like the key components that you use for setting up a trading partner setup, right? And just talk about them in maybe high level, unless you are being asked like any specific questions for a deeper dive into a specific area, right? Now the next question that you can anticipate is like, how does this application or Sterling integrator handle EDI transactions from inbound to outbound, right? So maybe you can take an example here. Like let's say, like assume, like make an assumption that let's say I'm a trading partner and I'm expecting a document from an external entity, right? And consider the inbound communication, right? And maybe take an extra document and explain like the processes, like they might be sending the file or dropping the file in a mailbox or maybe in a file system, and then you might have some business processes that might automatically get kick off, and then that actual is de-envelope process runs, right? Try to identify who the trading partner is, which map has to be invoked, if there is any translation. So I'm just giving an example. So consider inbound, and then similarly, go until like the file is being received at the front end, until the file is being pushed to a file system or an internal applications, right? And then vice versa. Take an outbound example. Tell that the file is being dropped in a file system, and then take it until you are posting or pushing it, like maybe using SFTP or any other protocol to an external entity. So give high level information of the high level steps of an outbound and an inbound, assuming some specific document type that you can consider. Or if you don't want to consider any specific document type, you can just say it in generic terminology as well. The next one is what are the main modules slash features of Sterling integrator, right? So translation, transmission, right? These are the two important like modules that we typically use in Sterling integrator. And then the observability, the troubleshooting part, the performance management, all those comes into picture, right? So the first question is like the core components and the main modules slash features are kind of similar, goes hand in hand, probably almost similar answers to that, right? Now like as I mentioned, this is not exhaustive. So based on what you answer, they might ask some follow-up questions just to vet out, like maybe if you are not bluffing, if they are not confident that you know the application based on what you have responded, they might go a little bit more deeper. They might ask some follow-up questions to the answer that you have given, right? So be very careful what you're answering, and be ready to expect some follow-up questions if you have not given what they were looking for in respect to the question that they have asked, right? Coming back to the mapping and translation category, like they might ask, how do you create and manage maps in Sterling Integrator? So now you're wearing the mapper hat, right? Tell them if you really have done mapping. Tell them how to create a map. How do you then test it? How do you deploy it, right? How is the mapping used in the business processes? Things like that. Tell end-to-end story of a map, of a journey of a map, right? In Sterling Integrator. Now, the next question is, what mapping standards or formats have you worked on? Like, so you need to be able to explain whether you have worked on X12, CSV, flat files, right, Edifact, all those things. And maybe just give an example, like a document type, right? The next one is, can you explain the process of developing a translation map using map editor? So just explain the process. Like when you start a map, you open the map editor in your local desktop. You have to then either import the standards or select the standards, create the mapping, like the linking, like talk about standard rule, extended rules. Then once the map is created, how do you test it in your local, right? You provide all the server related information. Then once everything is looks good, the output is what you are expecting, it matches the expectations. Then how do you then start the deployment, right, in your dev environment? How do you test that map to make sure that in runtime it is giving the same output, things like that, right? So explain that process itself. Now, and then the next question that you might expect is like, how do you handle complex mapping logic or custom business rules in Sterling Integrator, right? So this is where you might be able to then explain more in detail about the extended rules, like maybe if-else statement. Take and assume like this is what, like give an example of like, okay, mapping requirement specification. This is what the rule was, like the business rules was, and this was like complex. It was not something that we can implement in like just simple linking or standard rules. And I had to then use extended rule, and what kind of like maybe take like, okay, if this information is there in this segment, do this. If not, then do that, right? So something like that. Take a example and try to answer that, right? Just don't talk in like vague terminologies, right? Number four is business process development. All right. So business process development, like they might ask, what is the business process itself, right? And how do you design one? So you need to be able to explain like what exactly is a business process. Talk about the sequential steps that are being performed, and then how do you design? Like if you have a familiarity with graphical process model or GPM, or if you are more expert, you might be using like a text or notepad, right, to do the mapping. So explain the entire process of that. The follow-up questions might be, can you walk through the steps to create a business process for EDI message flow, right? This is where you might have to then tell some of the service names itself, or that you might be used. You don't have to be like telling all the services that you have used, but at least high level, the main uh, uh, services that you might have used for EDI message flow. So consider an inbound document that you receive, and if it is an EDI message or external message, what are the typical business process? Sorry, the services that or adapters that you use in the business process to implement that, and then how to incorporate error handling and notification in the business process. So this is where like they're going a little bit more deeper. Like one is